Russian, Chinese, and North Korean leaders meeting in secret and plotting against the United States. Does that sound like the opening of a Cold War thriller, or is it today's reality? Former President Donald Trump has raised the alarm, claiming that these three powerful adversaries are coming together, not by coincidence, but by design, working hand in hand to challenge America's strength on the world stage. And as the cameras roll, the question becomes unavoidable. If they are conspiring, what exactly is their plan, and how will Washington respond? Imagine the scene: Moscow, Beijing, and Pyongyang, all three capitals alive with closed-door meetings, guarded convoys, and carefully worded press releases that reveal little but suggest everything, while in Washington, intelligence agencies scramble to piece together fragments of information, intercepted communications, and satellite imagery that hint at an alliance forming in real time. And the American public watches with growing unease, remembering decades when nuclear threats and global
Standoff Dauphiné daily life.
Trump's claim is not just political rhetoric. It plays directly into the heightened anxieties of an era already on edge, with wars raging in Europe, tensions boiling in the Pacific, and questions about whether the United States can still maintain its position as the world's unrivaled superpower, and whether these three nations, historically divided by mistrust, can truly set aside their rivalries to unite against a common enemy. The setup is almost cinematic: Russia, weakened by international sanctions yet still flexing its nuclear muscle; China, emboldened by its economic dominance and military expansion in the South China Sea; and North Korea, unpredictable, secretive, and desperate for legitimacy, all standing shoulder to shoulder in defiance of Western influence, while Trump steps onto the stage and declares, "They're conspiring against us," a line designed to cut through political noise and stick in the minds of voters, allies, and adversaries alike. Conflict builds as analysts and commentators argue over what this means. Are these meetings mere diplomatic theater, a bluff to spook Washington and its allies, or are they the first steps towards something more concrete, a military pact, an economic bloc, a shared strategy to outmaneuver America on every front? The rising tension comes as U.S. officials remain cautious in their statements, avoiding dramatic labels, yet quietly reinforcing military positions in Asia, strengthening ties with NATO, and reaching out to partners in the Indo-Pacific like Japan, South Korea, and Australia, all while citizens ask themselves whether the world is slipping into a new version of the Cold War, this time with multiple enemies coordinating against one nation. Every press briefing, every leaked report, every fiery soundbite from Trump adds another layer to the story, and the media amplifies it with urgency, flashing images of Putin, Xi, and Kim Jong-un side by side, shaking hands, smiling for the cameras, while the voiceover whispers that behind those smiles lies a chilling reality. And in the background, the United States faces its own internal debates, political divisions, economic strains, questions of leadership, creating an atmosphere where outside threats feel even more dangerous because of what's happening at home, and Trump seizes on that tension, insisting that weakness in Washington invites aggression abroad. Yet the mystery lingers. What are these leaders really planning? And how much of Trump's warning is exaggeration? How much is grounded in intelligence the public has not yet seen? The suspense builds because the answers remain hidden, the pieces of the puzzle deliberately scattered, and viewers can feel the stakes rising with every unanswered question, every unsolved clue, every suggestion that America is not just facing one adversary, but three working in unison. The payoff looms as Trump's words ripple beyond partisan politics, echoing into international headlines, sparking debates in European parliaments, Asian capitals, and even among America's closest allies, who wonder whether they, too, should be bracing for an era where the balance of power is shifting faster than anyone anticipated. And just when it seems like the picture is becoming clear, new reports emerge of military drills near the Korean peninsula, Russian bombers testing NATO's defenses, and Chinese warships shadowing U.S. vessels in disputed waters, each move raising the possibility that this isn't just talk, but preparation for something much bigger. What happens when the world's most secretive regimes combine their strengths, pooling resources, technology, and intelligence, not just to challenge U.S. policies but to directly undermine American influence? What happens if America underestimates them, dismissing the conspiracy as political theater, only to wake up one morning to a coordinated strike, not necessarily on the battlefield, but in cyber warfare, in financial markets, in the corridors of diplomacy where deals are struck in silence? These are the questions hanging in the air tonight, unresolved, unsettling, and impossible to ignore, and as the lights dim on today's headlines, the stage is set for the next chapter in a story that feels like history repeating itself, but with even higher stakes, because this time, it's not just one enemy across the ocean, it's three, and they may be closer to each other, and closer to us than we realize. Part 1 left us on the edge of uncertainty, with the image of Russia, China, and North Korea aligning like storm clouds on the horizon. And as the story unfolds, the tension only thickens, because behind closed doors, details of their meetings remain deliberately shrouded in secrecy, while hints of coordination slip through in carefully staged press conferences, vague declarations of friendship, and subtle military movements that seem too synchronized to be coincidence. And the United States, watching from across oceans, finds itself caught between doubt and dread, unsure whether these meetings are symbolic gestures or the opening chapters of a grand strategy designed to weaken American influence step by step. And the unease grows louder when military analysts begin pointing out patterns. Russian energy deals with China that bypass the dollar, Chinese technology flowing quietly into North Korea's missile programs, and diplomatic statements that echo each other in tone and timing, as if written from the same script, leaving Washington insiders whispering about a new axis forming before our very eyes, one that could challenge the foundations of the post-war world order America helped build. The conflict escalates as the administration faces pressure from every direction. Hawks in Congress demand stronger responses, sanctions, and displays of power, while others warn that overreaction could push these nations even closer together. Yet the uncertainty of their true intentions makes restraint just as risky as confrontation. And in the midst of this debate, Trump's voice cuts through again, hammering the idea that America is being encircled, betrayed by its leader's weakness, and that only strength, unyielding, unapologetic strength, can prevent disaster, a message that resonates with those who fear the U.S. is slowly losing ground in a game it once dominated. Rising tension continues as the world stage becomes a chessboard in motion. Chinese warplanes crossing into contested airspace, Russian hackers targeting critical infrastructure, North Korea unveiling new missile tests timed suspiciously close to these diplomatic gatherings, each move like a carefully placed piece designed to send a message. But the question lingers: are these coordinated acts of defiance, or opportunistic signals amplified by coincidence? Every answer seems just out of reach, every theory more chilling than the last. And in this fog of uncertainty, America's allies grow restless, asking themselves whether they can still rely on Washington's promises, or whether they must begin preparing for a world where U.S. leadership is no longer guaranteed. The tension plays out not just in foreign capitals but in living rooms across America, where ordinary citizens scroll through news feeds filled with images of Putin smiling beside Xi, Kim Jong-un laughing in the background, the three men projecting unity as the anchors remind viewers of Trump's words: "They're conspiring against us." And whether you believe him or not, the optics alone are enough to make the warning feel real. The atmosphere grows heavier as subtle but undeniable shifts ripple across the globe. Oil markets fluctuate with every rumor of a new Russian-Chinese agreement. Asian neighbors accelerate weapons purchases in response to North Korea's boldness, and cyberattacks, unattributed but suspiciously sophisticated, test America's defenses in ways that feel like rehearsals for something bigger. Each event sharpening the sense that these nations are no longer acting in isolation, but as parts of a larger,
darker design.
Yet the ultimate reveal is still hidden, still locked behind the doors of meetings the public will never see, and that is what fuels the suspense, the gnawing question of what comes next, because in geopolitics, what is unseen is often more dangerous than what is revealed. At the same time, America's own political climate amplifies the tension. Divisions between parties, debates over military spending, arguments about whether the administration is doing enough or doing too much, each side warning of catastrophic consequences if the other side's advice is followed, leaving the public to wonder who to trust, who has the clearer picture of the threat that may be gathering just beyond the horizon. The mystery deepens when intelligence leaks suggest that Russian, Chinese, and North Korean envoys have been spotted at each other's military exercises, not merely as observers but as participants, and suddenly the notion of conspiracy no longer feels like a theory but like a shadow solidifying into something tangible, something deliberate, something that could change the balance of power if left unchecked. And still, the question remains unresolved. Are they building an alliance in the traditional sense, with signed agreements and binding commitments, or is this a looser arrangement, a silent understanding that their shared goal of undermining U.S. power is enough to unite them, even without official treaties? That ambiguity is what makes the situation so volatile, because the United States must prepare for the worst without ever being sure of what it is preparing against, like bracing for a storm whose shape and size can't yet be seen on radar. Meanwhile, Trump continues to amplify the alarm, repeating that history is repeating itself, that just as enemies once aligned during past global conflicts, they are aligning again now, and his words ignite debate. Some call them exaggeration, others call them foresight, but all agree they cannot be ignored, not when the stakes involve nuclear weapons, global economies, and the possibility of conflict spanning continents. The sense of unease builds like the slow tightening of a drum, each beat louder, closer, more insistent, as reports surface of secret summits scheduled in places far from the public eye, where interpreters, aides, and generals meet under heavy security, their conversations never disclosed, their handshakes never broadcast, their intentions left to speculation, and speculation, in this case, is enough to fuel dread. Because if these leaders are indeed conspiring, then the question isn't if they will act, but when and in what form. Every delay in clarity, every unanswered question, every strategic silence becomes part of the suspense, pulling viewers deeper into a narrative that feels less like news and more like a thriller unfolding in real time, where the audience is left guessing at motives, alliances, betrayals, and outcomes, yet unable to look away because they know that whatever is being decided behind those closed doors could shape not only the next headline but the next generation. And so the story pushes forward, unresolved, unrelenting, its next chapter already taking shape in whispers and rumors, in movements tracked by satellites, in coded language exchanged between leaders who smile for the cameras while keeping their true intentions locked away, and all that remains certain is that the United States and the world stand on the edge of something vast and uncertain, waiting for the moment when the hidden becomes visible and the conspiracy, if it exists, finally steps
Into the light.
And now, as the pieces of this unfolding drama grow sharper and the shadow of conspiracy takes a more defined shape, the moment arrives when the tension can no longer remain in whispers, because the signals coming from Moscow, Beijing, and Pyongyang are no longer subtle, no longer quiet, but glaring, deliberate, and impossible to dismiss, as military formations shift across maps. Joint naval drills ripple across contested seas, and speeches delivered on foreign soil openly frame the United States as the obstacle to a new era of global power, and suddenly, the story that began as speculation, as rumor, as Trump's fiery warning, begins to crystallize into something terrifyingly real, with intelligence leaks confirming that meetings once thought symbolic have produced written agreements, economic coordination to bypass sanctions, joint commitments to share military technology, and most chillingly, the suggestion of a pledge that an attack on one would be considered an attack on all. A line so familiar in Western defense treaties now whispered in the context of America's greatest adversaries, and in that revelation, the payoff explodes like thunder after a long building storm, because the possibility of three nuclear powers working in concert is no longer an idea, it is a fact, and it sends shockwaves through Washington, through NATO, through every American household that remembers the lessons of history. The stage that once seemed like a chessboard now feels like a battlefield in waiting, the pawns already in motion, the kings and queens locked in silent determination, and the United States, for all its power and might, suddenly looks smaller, surrounded, as if the walls are closing in, and Americans watching this story unfold realize that what is at stake is not only global influence or military dominance, but the very idea of safety, security, and leadership in a world that feels like it's slipping into the grip of forces determined to see America humbled. The emotional punch lands hardest when the images appear, Putin and Xi seated side by side, pens signing documents under the gaze of stern-faced generals, Kim Jong-un smiling with a kind of satisfaction that can only come from knowing he has been elevated from pariah to partner, and those images flash across screens in America like a warning flare, a signal that the unthinkable is no longer unthinkable, that the alliances we once mocked as fragile, temporary, or opportunistic have hardened into something that could alter the course of this century. The air becomes thick with the echoes of history, echoes of alliances that plunged the world into wars before, echoes of leaders who believed they could outlast America, echoes of warnings ignored until it was too late, and in that echo, the audience feels the weight of a truth too heavy to escape. We are living in a moment where the decisions made now will define not just the politics of a season, but the survival of a generation. And as the screen fades from those images of unity among America's adversaries back to the face of a divided United States, the question that Trump's voice first hurled into the air returns, sharper, louder, unavoidable: what will America do? Because the time for dismissing, for doubting, for debating whether this is real or imagined is over, the conspiracy is no longer a theory, it is a headline, a declaration, a challenge thrown directly at the feet of the United States, and the next move will not only decide the balance of power but will write the opening lines of the next chapter in world history. The impact hits like a final drumbeat, leaving no resolution, only a choice, and the realization that the future has arrived faster than anyone expected, with three enemies standing together in the shadows, daring America to step forward, daring the world to decide which side of history it will stand on. And as that reality sinks in, one truth remains impossible to ignore: this is no longer just politics, no longer just strategy, no longer just speculation. This is the beginning of something far greater, far darker, and far more dangerous, and whether America rises to meet it or falters in the face of it will define everything that comes next.